My name is Harold, and at 32 years old, I never expected my scientific research to make national headlines. That morning, as notifications flooded my phone about my thesis publication, I received a call from my sister Sandra. Her voice trembled as she informed me, "Our parents were furious. They discovered my success on Facebook, along with everyone else. It brought back memories of when I turned 18, and they declared I was on my own financially, a stark contrast to the luxury condo they purchased for Sandra's 21st birthday." Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and join me for a journey about family, perseverance, and finding success on your own terms. Growing up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood in California, our family seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Our two-story home sat on a quiet street lined with palm trees, where my parents had settled after my father secured a management position at a local insurance company. My mother worked part-time as a dental hygienist, allowing her to be home most afternoons when I returned from school. From an early age, they instilled in me the value of academic excellence, often reminding me that education was the key to success in America. My childhood bedroom walls were decorated with academic achievement certificates rather than sports posters. While other kids enjoyed summer camps and leisurely weekends, mine were filled with additional reading assignments and math workbooks. I didn't particularly mind. I genuinely enjoyed learning and found satisfaction in solving complex problems. Everything changed when my sister Sandra was born when I was 7 years old. From the moment she arrived, it was clear she held a special place in our family dynamic. My parents' faces would light up when she entered a room, their voices softening when they spoke to her. Sandra received a level of unconditional affection I realized I had never experienced. "Your sister is still young, Harold," my mother would say whenever I pointed out the discrepancy in how we were treated. "She needs more attention now. You're already such a responsible boy." Despite the shifting family dynamics, I continued to excel academically. In elementary school, I won the district science fair 3 years running. By middle school, I was placed in advanced classes across all subjects. My freshman year of high school, I scored in the top percentile on standardized tests, earning recognition from the state educational board. "That's expected," my father said when I showed him the congratulatory letter. "You've always been smart. Now you need to focus on how to translate that into a stable career." The turning point in my academic journey came during junior year when Mr. Patterson, my chemistry teacher, took me aside after class one day. I had just presented a research project on renewable energy sources that had earned me an A+. "Harold, you have a genuine gift for scientific inquiry," he said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Have you considered pursuing research as a career? With your analytical mind, you could make real contributions to the field." That conversation planted a seed that would eventually blossom into my life's passion. For the first time, someone saw beyond my grades to the potential of what I could create and discover. It was addictive, that feeling of being truly seen. While my academic interests were flourishing, my parents continued emphasizing the importance of self-sufficiency. "Nothing worth having comes easily," my father would lecture during dinner. "You need to work for what you want in this world." This philosophy manifested in practical ways. When I turned 16 and needed a computer for school projects, my parents refused to purchase one outright. "If you want a computer, you'll need to earn it," my father said firmly. "It will mean more to you that way." So I took a part-time job stocking shelves at the local grocery store, working weekends and evenings after completing my homework. For 6 months, I saved every dollar until finally purchasing a modest desktop computer. The pride I felt setting it up in my room was undeniable, though it came with the exhaustion of balancing work and school. By senior year, I had my sights set on prestigious universities with strong science programs. When acceptance letters arrived, including one from an Ivy League school across the country, I was ecstatic. My parents, however, were not. "The state university is only 30 minutes away," my mother argued. "You could live at home and save money. Why go into debt when there's a perfectly good school nearby?" "Because the research opportunities at Eastridge are unmatched," I explained, trying to contain my frustration. "Professor Williams there is doing groundbreaking work in materials science. I could learn directly from him." "You and your big dreams," my father scoffed. Sometimes practicality needs to come before ambition. The tension built over weeks, culminating in a painful conversation in our living room one evening. I had just received confirmation of a partial scholarship that would cover about half the tuition, but it still left a significant financial gap. "If you insist on going across the country instead of the sensible option," my father said, his voice unnervingly calm, "then you need to understand something. You will be on your own financially. We will not be contributing to your education or living expenses." "But you always said you were saving for my college," I protested, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "For a reasonable college choice," my mother interjected. "This is your decision, Harold, and with adult decisions come adult responsibilities." As their words sank in, I felt a complex mix of betrayal, determination, and fear. The dream university suddenly seemed much farther away, but something inside me hardened. If independence was the price of pursuing my passion, then I would pay it. "I understand," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "I'll figure it out on my own." What I didn't understand then was how those words would shape the next decade of my life, creating a divide that would eventually span much more than just physical distance. The journey to Eastridge University marked my first real taste of independence. I packed everything I owned into my 15-year-old Honda Civic, a graduation present from my grandparents before they passed. The car had over 150,000 miles on it, and made alarming noises when it exceeded 60 miles per hour, but it was mine. My parents stood in the driveway as I loaded the final items, their expressions a mixture of disapproval and resignation. "Call us when you get there," my mother said, giving me a brief hug. My father simply nodded, adding, "Drive safely." No mention of visiting, no promises to send care packages or check in regularly. The message was clear. I had chosen this path, and I would walk it alone. The 3-day drive across the country gave me plenty of time to alternate between excitement about my future and anxiety about how I would manage financially. The partial scholarship would cover tuition, but housing, food, books, and other expenses would be entirely my responsibility. Arriving at Eastridge was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The campus sprawled across acres of manicured lawns and historic buildings, filled with students who seemed far more confident and prepared than I felt. My assigned dormitory was a century-old building with minimal amenities. I shared a cramped room with Brian Mitchell, a music theory major from Seattle with an easy laugh and perpetually disheveled appearance. "So your parents just cut you off?" Brian asked one night after I explained my situation. "That's rough, man." "They made their position clear," I replied, trying to sound more matter-of-fact than hurt. "But I have a plan." That plan involved an exhausting schedule. I took a full course load of science and mathematics classes, worked 20 hours weekly at the university library shelving books, delivered pizzas 3 nights a week, and spent weekend mornings washing dishes at a local diner. Between shifts, I studied in any quiet corner I could find, often surviving on minimal sleep. There were moments of utter exhaustion that first semester, when I questioned whether I had made the right choice. One particularly low point came during midterms week. After working a double shift at the diner, I had stayed up all night finishing a chemistry lab report. During my morning physics exam, the equations on the page began to blur together. I barely made it through the test before rushing to the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face and tried not to cry from sheer fatigue. Brian became an unexpected source of support during these challenging times. He would save me leftovers when I missed dinner at the dining hall, offer his notes when I missed a class due to work, and sometimes just listen when I needed to vent. "You're working harder than anyone I know," he told me once. "Most people would have given up by now." My calls home grew increasingly infrequent and brief. Conversations with my parents followed a predictable pattern. Superficial inquiries about classes, reminders to make practical decisions, and updates about Sandra that emphasized how well she was doing in high school. There was never any acknowledgement of my struggles or offers of assistance. During my sophomore year, I received a text message from Sandra with a photo attached. It showed her standing beside a brand-new Toyota Camry, beaming with pride. The caption read, "Mom and Dad's graduation gift. Isn't it awesome?" I stared at the image for a long time, a knot forming in my stomach. The car was worth at least 4 times what my used Honda had cost. I typed several responses, deleting each one before finally settling on, "Congrats, drive safely." That Thanksgiving, I couldn't afford the flight home. When I called to inform my parents, my mother sounded disappointed but offered no solution. "That's unfortunate," she said. "We'll miss you at dinner." I spent the holiday in the nearly empty dormitory, eating microwaved turkey dinner with the handful of international students who also remained on campus. Though they welcomed me warmly, I couldn't shake the feeling of being forgotten by my own family. The turning point in my academic career came during junior year, when Professor Michael Davidson noticed my consistent top performance in his advanced materials science course. After class one day, he approached me with an unexpected offer. "Harold, I'm assembling a small research team for a project on sustainable polymers," he said. "Your work in this class has been exceptional. Would you be interested in joining us?" The opportunity was incredible, offering not only valuable research experience, but also a modest stipend that would allow me to reduce my hours at one of my jobs. Under Professor Davidson's mentorship, I discovered my true calling in materials science innovation. "You have a natural intuition for this work," he commented after I proposed a modification to their experimental approach that yielded better results. "Have you considered graduate studies?" Until that moment, I had been focused solely on completing my undergraduate degree and finding employment that would provide financial stability. The idea of continuing to master's and potentially doctorate studies seemed financially impossible. "I don't think I can afford more schooling," I admitted. "There are fellowships and research assistantships that cover tuition and provide stipends," Professor Davidson explained. "With your abilities, you would be a strong candidate." That conversation opened a door I hadn't allowed myself to consider. When Professor Davidson offered to recommend me for the university's accelerated master's program with a full scholarship and research assistantship, it felt like validation of every sacrifice I had made. For the first time since leaving home, I allowed myself to believe that my difficult choice had been the right one. As I approached graduation, I had survived 4 years of grueling work and study, maintained a nearly perfect GPA, and secured a path to continue my education without accumulating debt. The only shadow on these accomplishments was knowing that when I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, there would be no family members in the audience cheering me on. After completing my undergraduate degree, and before beginning the master's program, I decided to visit home for the first time in nearly 2 years. The decision wasn't easy, but a part of me hoped that time and my academic success might have softened my parents' stance. Driving up to my childhood home felt strangely disorienting. Everything looked the same, from the neatly trimmed hedges to the hanging basket of petunias by the front door, yet I felt like a visitor rather than a returning son. My mother opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Harold, you made it. Come in, dinner's almost ready." My father emerged from his study, offering a firm handshake instead of a hug. "How was the drive?" The conversation around the dinner table was stilted and superficial. My parents asked generic questions about my classes but showed little interest in the details of my research or the challenges I had overcome. When I mentioned Professor Davidson's mentorship and my acceptance to the master's program, my father nodded without enthusiasm. "Just make sure this advanced degree translates to actual employment," he said. "Academic achievements mean nothing without financial security." Sandra, now a college sophomore herself at the state university while living at home, dominated the conversation with stories about her social life and the marketing internship my father had arranged through a business connection. "Everyone at the company loves her," my mother beamed. "The director said she has natural talent." I forced a smile and offered congratulations, trying to suppress the sting of knowing my accomplishments had never earned such unconditional praise. Later that evening, Sandra burst into my old bedroom, now redecorated as a guest room with no trace of my childhood remaining. "Almost forgot to tell you," she said excitedly. "Mom and Dad are throwing me a massive 21st birthday party next weekend. You have to stay for it." The timing was tight with my research assistantship starting soon, but refusing would only create more tension. "Sure, I'll be there." The party was held at an upscale country club, where my father occasionally golfed with business associates. At least 100 guests attended, including family, friends, relatives, and Sandra's extensive social circle. I recognized few faces and stood awkwardly on the periphery of conversations, feeling like an intruder at a stranger's celebration. After dinner and several speeches praising Sandra's many qualities, my father clinked his glass for attention and motioned for my sister to join him at the center of the room. As many of you know, our Sandra has always had a special place in our hearts, he began, his voice warm with affection I barely recognized. She has brought us nothing but joy and pride. Now, as she turns 21 and continues to excel in her studies while already building her professional network, her mother and I wanted to give her something special to mark this milestone. My father handed Sandra a small gift box. She opened it with theatrical excitement, pulling out a key attached to a silver keychain. "Is this what I think it is?" she gasped, though her lack of genuine surprise suggested she already knew what was coming. "Why don't we all find out?" my father replied with a grin. "Everyone, please join us outside." The crowd moved to the country club's front entrance, where my parents' event planner had arranged for a small bus to transport everyone to the surprise location. I followed mechanically, a sense of dread building in my chest. 20 minutes later, we arrived at a new luxury condominium development in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. The bus stopped in front of a sleek building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a uniformed doorman. "Welcome to the Westmont," my father announced proudly as the group disembarked, and specifically, to Unit 1203, Sandra's new home. The crowd erupted in gasps and congratulations as Sandra squealed in delight. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. A condo in this neighborhood easily cost 7 figures, more money than I could hope to accumulate in decades of work. We were ushered up to the 12th floor, where Sandra unlocked the door to reveal a completely furnished 2-bedroom apartment with panoramic city views, designer furniture, and state-of-the-art appliances. The interior designer who had coordinated the space guided the tour, pointing out custom features and exclusive materials. The Italian marble countertops were specially imported, she explained as guests oohed and ahed, and all the furniture is from Restoration Hardware's premium collection. As people wandered through the apartment, exclaiming over its luxuries, I felt as though I were having an out-of-body experience. Memories flashed through my mind, working the overnight shift at the pizza place to cover my textbook costs, the broken heater in my off-campus apartment that the landlord wouldn't fix for weeks in the dead of winter, eating ramen noodles for days to stretch my food budget until payday. "Isn't this amazing?" a voice beside me asked. It was my mother, beaming with pride at the opulent surroundings. Sandra deserves a good start in life. I couldn't form a response. The implication that I somehow hadn't deserved the same consideration left me speechless. Later, as the party continued with champagne flowing freely, I found Sandra alone in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. "Congratulations," I managed, trying to keep bitterness from my voice. "It's quite a place." "Thanks. I still can't believe it's mine," she gushed. "Mom and Dad said I can live here while finishing college, and then keep it as an investment property if I want to move somewhere else later." "That's very generous," I said carefully. Sandra paused, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face. "They wanted to make sure I could focus on school without worrying about housing costs. You know how they are about education coming first." The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical pain in my chest. I excused myself and found a quiet hallway where I could breathe and gather my thoughts. That's where my father found me 10 minutes later. "Everything all right?" "You disappeared from the celebration," he said, his tone suggesting mild annoyance rather than concern. "I'm trying to understand something," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "When I was 18, you told me I was on my own financially if I chose to attend Eastridge. I've worked multiple jobs through college, barely slept, and nearly burned out trying to stay afloat while maintaining my grades. And now you buy Sandra a luxury condo so she can focus on her education without financial stress?" My father's expression hardened. "Your situations are completely different. You chose to leave home for an unnecessarily expensive school against our advice. Sandra listened to us and stayed local. So this is punishment for not following your plan for my life? Don't be dramatic, Harold. Life isn't fair. Sometimes siblings receive different things based on different circumstances. Sandra needed this support. You've proven you can succeed independently. Needed? I echoed in disbelief. Or wanted? My father's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate your attitude. This is Sandra's special day, and you're making it about yourself. I expected more maturity from you. With that, he turned and walked back to the party, leaving me with the clear message that my feelings on the matter were irrelevant. In that moment, something fundamentally shifted in my perception of my family and my place within it. I wasn't just financially on my own, I was emotionally isolated as well. I stayed just long enough to avoid creating a scene, then quietly told Sandra I had an early drive the next day and needed to leave. I didn't say goodbye to my parents, who were busy chatting with guests. Back at my childhood home, I packed my few belongings and wrote a brief note saying I had left early due to research commitments. By midnight, I was on the highway, heading not back to Eastridge, but in an entirely different direction, tears blurring my vision as I drove away from the family that had made their priorities abundantly clear. The highway stretched endlessly before me as I drove through the night, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the painful revelation of my family's preferential treatment. Streetlights cast intermittent glows across the dashboard, illuminating my white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. I had no clear destination in mind, just a desperate need to escape. Somewhere around 3 a.m, exhaustion forced me to pull into a roadside motel. As I collapsed onto the thin mattress, the full weight of what had transpired hit me in waves. The luxury condo, the carefree smile on Sandra's face, my father's dismissive words, all swirled together in a toxic mixture of hurt and betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text message from Brian, my former roommate who had remained a loyal friend despite the distance. "How'd the homecoming go? You alive?" he wrote. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing a response that barely scratched the surface of my emotional turmoil. They bought Sandra a $1 million condo for her birthday while I worked 3 jobs to buy ramen. Brian's reply came quickly. "What the actual hell? Call me." Hearing a friendly voice provided momentary relief as I recounted the events of the past few days. Brian listened without interrupting, then offered his characteristically blunt assessment. "Your parents are playing favorites so blatantly it's almost impressive. What's your next move?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm in a motel somewhere in Nevada. I just started driving." "Come to Portland," he suggested without hesitation. "I have a spare room in my apartment since Kyle moved out. It's nothing fancy, but you can crash while figuring things out." Brian's offer provided the direction I desperately needed. 2 days later, I arrived in Portland, Oregon, a city I had never visited but would soon call home. His apartment was a modest 2-bedroom in an older building near the university, where he was completing his PhD in musicology. "Welcome to Casa Mitchell," he announced, showing me to a small room with just enough space for a bed and desk. Bathrooms down the hall, kitchen's a disaster, and the neighbors think 3 a.m. is the perfect time to practice bass guitar. But the rent's cheap, and the location's decent. "It's perfect," I said sincerely. After years of dormitories and shared housing, the simple room felt like a sanctuary. Over the next few weeks, I researched my options. Transferring my master's program across the country mid-year would be challenging, but remaining in my current university was financially and emotionally untenable. After reviewing several programs, I found that Portland State University had a respected materials science department with a focus on environmental applications, aligning perfectly with my research interests. "They're still accepting PhD applications for fall admission," I told Brian one evening. "If I apply directly to the doctoral program and bypass finishing my master's, I might be able to secure funding." "Go for it," he encouraged. "You've got the credentials, and honestly, a fresh start might be exactly what you need." The application process was grueling, requiring transcripts, recommendation letters, research proposals, and statements of purpose. Professor Davidson was surprised by my decision but supportive, writing a glowing recommendation that emphasized my resilience and innovative thinking. "You have enormous potential, Harold," he wrote in an email. "While I'm disappointed to lose you from our program, I understand your need for a change. Portland State would be fortunate to have you. 2 months after applying, I received the news I had been hoping for: acceptance to the PhD program with a full tuition waiver and research assistantship. The financial package wasn't lavish, but it would allow me to focus on my studies without working multiple side jobs for the first time in my academic career. My initial meeting with Professor Elizabeth Winters, who would become my doctoral advisor, cemented my confidence in the decision. A pioneering researcher in sustainable materials, she had a reputation for being demanding but fair, pushing her students toward excellence while providing genuine mentorship. Your proposal on biodegradable polymers derived from agricultural waste is intriguing, she said during our first meeting, her keen eyes studying me over reading glasses. It's ambitious, possibly too ambitious for the typical doctoral timeline, but I appreciate researchers who aim high. Under her guidance, I refined my research focus to developing recyclable materials that mimicked the durability of plastics without their environmental persistence. The work was challenging and exciting, offering both intellectual stimulation and the potential for real-world impact. As I settled into my new life in Portland, I made the difficult decision to limit contact with my family. When my mother called asking why I had left without saying goodbye, I provided minimal information about my relocation. I've transferred to a doctoral program in Portland, I explained, keeping my tone neutral. It's a better fit for my research interests. Portland? But that's even farther away, she protested. Why would you make such an impulsive decision without discussing it with us? I'm an adult making my own choices, I replied, echoing the independence they had forced upon me years ago, just as you said I should. The conversation ended awkwardly, with my mother expressing disappointment in my continued determination to distance yourself from the family. My father, true to form, did not call at all. Sandra reached out several times, leaving voicemails that ranged from confused to hurt. Mom says you moved across the country again. What's going on? Are you mad about something? Call me back, please. I couldn't bring myself to return her calls. Sandra wasn't deliberately cruel, but she remained oblivious to the disparity in how we had been treated, a blindness that felt like a form of complicity. Occasionally, emails would arrive from my parents, typically brief inquiries about my well-being wrapped in thinly veiled criticism about my life choices. None contained any acknowledgement of the inequality that had driven me away or apologies for their role in it. With physical distance providing emotional protection, I gradually built a new support system. Fellow doctoral candidates in my research group became friends and confidants. We shared the unique pressures of academic research, celebrated small victories in the lab, and commiserated over setbacks. Professor Winters introduced me to her network of colleagues in the field, opening doors to conferences and collaborative opportunities. Family is sometimes who you choose, not who you're born to. Brian told me one evening as we shared beers with a group of friends who had gathered at our apartment for dinner. Looking around at the diverse collection of people who had welcomed me into their lives without judgment, I felt the truth of his words. These connections, based on mutual respect and shared experiences rather than obligation, were healing wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged. Portland became home in a way that neither my childhood house nor college town had ever been. I discovered hiking trails in the surrounding mountains, developed an appreciation for local craft beers, and even adopted a rescue cat named Newton, who kept me company during late nights of writing and research. The painful memories didn't disappear, but they gradually lost their sharp edges. With each small success in my research, each new friendship formed, each season that passed without the drama of family obligations, I built a life that was authentically mine, shaped by my own choices rather than reactions to others' expectations or rejections. As my first year in Portland drew to a close, I received a holiday card from my parents with a family photo featuring them and Sandra standing in front of her condo. The message inside read simply, "Wishing you well. We miss having you in the family photos." The absence of any invitation to visit or acknowledgement of my new life spoke volumes. I placed the card in a drawer rather than displaying it, a symbolic relegation of my birth family to the background of my life. My true family was now the one I was creating day by day, connection by connection, in this city that had offered me a second chance at belonging. The fluorescent lights of the laboratory hummed softly, as I peered into a microscope at 2 in the morning, the only sounds the occasional whir of ventilation systems and the tapping of my pencil against the lab notebook. Sleep had become a luxury I could rarely afford as my doctoral research intensified. The university building was nearly deserted at this hour, which suited my purposes perfectly. Uninterrupted access to equipment meant faster progress. "I thought I might find you here," came a voice from the doorway. It was Jessica Lawson, another doctoral candidate whose research on sustainable adhesives occasionally overlapped with mine. "Do you ever sleep?" I straightened from the microscope, rubbing my eyes. "Sleep is for the weak and the well-adjusted." She laughed, setting a paper cup of coffee beside my notes. "Brought reinforcements. How's the sample degradation test going?" "Not great," I admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. 3 months of work, and the polymer still breaks down too quickly under UV exposure. Back to the drawing board. This was the recurring pattern of my second year in the doctoral program. Promising theories followed by disappointing practical results. My research aimed to develop a plastic alternative that was both durable during use and completely biodegradable after disposal, a holy grail of materials science that had eluded researchers for decades. The initial experimental prototypes had seemed promising in preliminary tests, showing suitable strength and flexibility. But subsequent testing revealed fatal flaws. Some samples degraded too quickly when exposed to sunlight, making them impractical for real-world applications, while others proved too resistant to natural breakdown, defeating the environmental purpose. Each failure meant reformulating from scratch, adjusting chemical compositions, testing new additives, and running exhaustive analyses. The process was mentally and physically draining, compounded by the pressure of looming deadlines. "The Department Review Committee wants updated results by next month," Professor Winters reminded me during our weekly meeting. "The continued funding depends on demonstrable progress." "I understand," I replied, though internally I was calculating how many more sleepless nights would be required to produce something worthy of presentation. "I'll have something substantial to show them." The university's research grant that supported my work was competitive and contingent on regular evaluations. Without it, continuing my education would become nearly impossible. Unlike many of my peers, I had no family financial safety net to fall back on if institutional funding disappeared. Late one night, after particularly frustrating lab results, I found myself sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by research papers and failed testing data. Newton the cat curled contentedly in my lap, oblivious to my professional crisis. "What am I missing?" I muttered, scanning the chemical compositions for the 100th time. The fundamental challenge remained unchanged, creating a material strong enough for commercial use yet susceptible to natural decomposition when discarded. It seemed an impossible contradiction. The breakthrough came not from a scientific journal or sophisticated analysis, but from an unexpected source. While hiking on a rare free weekend, I observed how fallen trees decompose differently depending on their exposure to soil microorganisms. Some sections remained intact while others rapidly returned to the earth. What if the trigger for degradation isn't just UV light or water, but specific biological agents? I theorized to Professor Winters the following Monday. We could design a polymer that remains stable indefinitely, unless exposed to particular enzymes, found only in composting conditions. She considered the concept thoughtfully. "It's an interesting approach, but enormously complex. You'd essentially be creating a material with conditional stability." "Exactly," I said, energized by her understanding. "Functionally permanent, until intentionally decomposed." With this new direction, my research gained momentum. I designed experimental polymers with molecular structures resistant to environmental stressors, but vulnerable to specific enzymatic action. The initial results were promising enough to secure continued funding, though practical applications remained theoretical. The real breakthrough occurred during the 24th month of experimentation, after countless failures and refinements. A sample subjected to simulated weathering maintained structural integrity, then decomposed completely when introduced to a composting environment containing specific bacterial strains. "It works," I whispered incredulously, staring at the data readouts. "It actually works." Jessica was the first person I told, calling her at an unreasonable hour with news that couldn't wait until morning. The conditional degradation pathway is viable. Come see the results yourself. She arrived at the lab still wearing pajama pants under her coat. This better be worth interrupting my first decent sleep in weeks, she grumbled, before falling silent as I showed her the before and after samples and corresponding data. Harold, she said finally, do you realize what you've done? This could change everything about how we approach disposable materials. The following months were consumed by verification testing, refining the formula, and documenting the discovery process. Writing my dissertation became an all-consuming task, transforming complex scientific concepts into a cohesive narrative that explained both the methodology and potential applications. Professor Winters proved invaluable during this phase, reviewing drafts with meticulous attention and pushing me to clarify my reasoning where it became too technical or assumed too much background knowledge. Your work deserves to be understood beyond a small circle of specialists, she insisted. The environmental implications alone warrant broader communication. As my defense date approached, anxiety and excitement warred within me. The dissertation committee would include not only university faculty, but visiting professors from other institutions, all experts who would scrutinize every aspect of my research. You're ready for this, Professor Winters assured me during our final preparation meeting. You know this material better than anyone. Trust that knowledge. The defense itself passed in a blur of questions, explanations, and scientific debate. For 3 hours, I presented my findings and responded to increasingly specific inquiries about methodology and implications. When it concluded, the committee asked me to wait outside while they deliberated. 20 minutes later, Professor Winters emerged with a rare, full smile. Congratulations, Dr. Lawson. Your dissertation has been accepted with distinction. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. After years of financial struggle, academic challenges, and personal sacrifices, I had reached the summit I had been climbing toward since leaving home. Yet as I accepted congratulations from colleagues and professors, I felt a hollow space where family celebration should have been. The graduation ceremony took place on a brilliantly sunny day in May. As I donned the doctoral regalia and prepared to walk across the stage, I scanned the audience reflexively, knowing I would see no familiar faces from my childhood, but unable to suppress the ingrained habit. Jessica noticed my expression and squeezed my arm. We're all here for you, she said, gesturing to our research group, Professor Winters, and friends including Brian, who had made signs with embarrassingly enthusiastic messages of support. As my name was called and I accepted my diploma, their cheers echoed through the auditorium. In that moment, I understood that while blood connections had failed me, the family I had chosen would never let me stand alone. The local university paper ran a feature on my research the following week, highlighting its potential environmental impact. This caught the attention of a regional science correspondent who requested an interview about practical applications of the biodegradable polymer. Your approach differs from previous attempts at sustainable materials, the journalist noted during our conversation. Most researchers focus on either durability or degradability, but you've managed to incorporate both conditionally. The key was recognizing that these aren't mutually exclusive properties if the degradation pathway is properly controlled, I explained, finding unexpected enjoyment in translating complex concepts for a broader audience. The resulting article appeared in several scientific publications, generating interest from environmental organizations and materials manufacturers. Each new contact and expression of interest validated not just my research but the difficult path I had chosen years before, when I decided to pursue my passion despite lack of family support. As my professional recognition grew, I occasionally wondered if news of my success would reach my parents through academic or scientific channels. The answer came in an unexpected form, setting in motion events that would force me to confront the family issues I had carefully compartmentalized for years. The email from the editor of Nature Materials arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning as I sipped coffee in my office at the university, where I had accepted a postdoctoral research position following graduation. We are pleased to inform you that your paper, Enzymatically Triggered Biodegradation of Synthetic Polymers, a New Approach to Sustainable Materials, has been accepted for publication in our upcoming special issue on environmental innovation. I read the message 3 times, barely believing what I was seeing. Nature Materials was among the most prestigious scientific journals in the field, with an acceptance rate below 8%. Publication would exponentially increase the visibility and credibility of my research. Professor Winters knocked on my open-door moments after I forwarded her the email. "I just saw the news," she said, beaming. "This is exceptional, Harold. Very few researchers at your career stage achieve publication in a journal of this caliber." "I still can't quite believe it," I admitted. "It feels surreal." "Believe it," she insisted, "and prepare yourself for what comes next. This level of publication tends to generate significant attention." Her prediction proved accurate. Within days of the article appearing online, my inbox flooded with messages from fellow researchers, environmental advocacy groups, and industry representatives interested in potential applications. The University Public Relations Department arranged a series of interviews with science journalists eager to explain the breakthrough to a general audience. The coverage expanded beyond scientific circles when a major news outlet ran a feature on promising environmental innovations. My research was highlighted as a potential game-changer in addressing plastic pollution, complete with a photo of me in the laboratory and quotes from the paper. "The scientist behind this breakthrough material might revolutionize how we think about disposable products," the article proclaimed, an assessment that felt both exhilarating and intimidating in its implications. More mainstream coverage followed. A cable news science program invited me for an interview, during which the host asked about practical applications for everyday consumers. "Imagine packaging that remains perfectly stable on store shelves and in your home, but completely breaks down in commercial composting facilities," I explained. "No special handling required, no persistent waste in landfills or oceans. That's the potential we're working toward." The segment aired nationally during prime time, bringing my research to audiences far beyond academic and scientific communities. Watching myself on television was disorienting, the surreal culmination of a journey that had begun with that chemistry teacher's encouragement years ago. As public interest grew, so did commercial opportunities. A major materials corporation reached out to discuss licensing the technology for development. "We believe your polymer formulation could have significant market applications," their representative explained during our initial meeting. "We'd like to explore a partnership to scale production and integrate it into consumer products." The potential for my research to move from theoretical to practical, from laboratory to everyday life, was the fulfillment of ambitions I had scarcely allowed myself to acknowledge. The financial implications were substantial as well. The proposed licensing agreement would provide security I had never known. Amidst this professional whirlwind, I received an unexpected call one evening from a number I nearly didn't recognize. It had been over a year since we last spoke. "Harold, it's Sandra." Her voice triggered a complex mix of emotions I had successfully suppressed through immersion in my work. "Sandra, this is surprising. I saw you on television last night," she said, sounding both impressed and uncertain. "Your research sounds amazing. Why didn't you tell us about any of this?" The question carried an unintended irony that nearly made me laugh. "I haven't exactly been on the family update list for a while." "That's not fair," she protested. "You're the one who disappeared and barely responds to messages." Rather than argue, I asked, "How did you get this number?" "I changed it when I moved." "Jessica, from your lab," she replied. "I found her email on the university website and explained I was your sister, trying to reach you about a family matter." Mental note: discuss boundaries with lab colleagues. What family matter? Sandra hesitated before answering. "Mom and Dad saw the news report too. They found out about your success the same way everyone else did, through Facebook posts linking to articles about your research. Dad is, well, he's pretty angry that you never told them about any of this." The absurdity was almost perfect. After years of emotional and financial abandonment, my father felt entitled to advance notice of my professional achievements. "Their reaction to seeing my success is anger?" I asked, unable to keep the incredulity from my voice. "It's complicated," Sandra sighed. "I think they're proud but hurt. They keep saying they had to learn about their son's breakthrough research from neighbors and friends congratulating them," Mom cried. "A decade ago, Those words would have pierced me with guilt. Now, they barely penetrated the protective layers I had built around my heart. I'm not sure what response they expected after making it crystal clear I was on my own. That was years ago, Harold. People change. Families evolve. Her voice softened. Would you consider coming home for a visit? I think it's time to heal this rift. You've obviously done amazingly well on your own, so maybe now you can all move forward without the old baggage. The suggestion sent a surge of anxiety through me. I had carefully constructed a life without the emotional complications of my family relationships. Reopening those wounds seemed unnecessarily painful. I don't know, Sandra. I have a lot going on with the research and potential commercial applications. Just think about it, she urged. Things would be different now. You're not the struggling student anymore. You're Dr. Harold Williams, with nationally recognized research. The dynamics have changed. After we hung up, I sat in my darkened apartment, absently stroking Newton while considering Sandra's words. Had the dynamics truly changed, or had success simply made me valuable enough to acknowledge again? The cynical interpretation felt protective, but also exhausting to maintain. Over the next week, Sandra sent several texts with increasing urgency, culminating in, "Please come home next month for the weekend. I've already told Mom and Dad you're considering it. They want to reconnect." Jessica noticed my distraction during lab work and cornered me in the break room. "What's going on? You've been staring into space all week." When I explained the situation, she offered a perspective I hadn't considered. Maybe seeing them again would give you closure, if nothing else. You've built this amazing life and career, despite their lack of support. There's power in showing them that, whether or not they acknowledge it. Her words resonated with an unacknowledged desire. Perhaps a part of me did want them to see what I had accomplished, to understand what they had missed by withholding their support. Whether this desire was about validation or vindication, I wasn't entirely sure. After days of internal debate, I replied to Sandra, "I'll come for the weekend. No promises beyond that." Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "That's wonderful. They'll be so happy. I promise things will be different this time." As I booked the flight to California, uncertainty mingled with a strange sense of anticipation. I had left as a rejected son seeking escape. I would return as a successful scientist on my own terms. Whatever happened during this reunion, I would no longer be defined by their approval or its absence. The question remaining was whether I could find a way to release the anger and hurt that had fueled so much of my determination, or if some wounds ran too deep for even time and success to heal. The airplane descended through clouds as the California coastline came into view, sunlight glinting off the Pacific Ocean. My stomach tightened with each foot of altitude lost, a physical manifestation of the emotional turbulence awaiting me below. "You doing okay?" The elderly woman beside me asked, noticing my white-knuckled grip on the armrest. "Just not a fan of landings," I replied with a forced smile, not wanting to explain that my anxiety had nothing to do with aviation and everything to do with the family reunion ahead. After retrieving my single carry-on bag, I rented a car rather than accepting Sandra's offer to pick me up. The small act of independence gave me control over at least one aspect of this uncertain weekend. I needed the option to leave on my terms if things went poorly. Sandra had suggested meeting at a coffee shop before heading to our parents' house, a neutral location where we could talk privately first. Driving to the agreed location, I recognized it as a place we had occasionally visited during my high school years, a small connection to a past life that felt increasingly distant. She was already waiting at an outside table, looking much the same as I remembered but with a new sophistication in her clothing and hairstyle. When she spotted me, her face lit up with a genuine smile that momentarily dissolved my reservations. "Harold!" She jumped up and embraced me before I could prepare myself for the contact. "I can't believe you're actually here." We settled at the table with our coffees. The initial conversation focused on safe topics: my flight, the weather, her marketing job at a local tech company. Eventually, she steered us toward the elephant in the room. "Before we go to the house, I want to say something," Sandra began, her expression turning serious. "I didn't fully understand what happened between you and our parents until recently. I was young and self-absorbed when you left for college, And later, when you moved away completely, I just accepted their narrative that you chose distance over family. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. After seeing you on television, I pressed them for the full story. She looked down, stirring her coffee unnecessarily. They finally admitted how differently they treated us financially. The condo, the car, my tuition, compared to telling you that you were on your own. I had no idea, Harold. I always assumed they helped you the same way. The acknowledgement I had never expected to hear loosened something tight within my chest. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. I feel terrible, she continued. All these years, I've been benefiting from their generosity while you were struggling, and I never questioned it. That makes me complicit in their unfairness. You were young, I offered, surprising myself with the genuine absolution. We don't question the advantages we're given. That's human nature. Still, I should have seen it, especially after they gave me the condo. She reached across the table, hesitantly touching my hand. I'm sorry, Harold. Truly sorry. The sincerity in her eyes helped dissolve some of the resentment I had carried toward her. Sandra hadn't created the disparity, even if she had benefited from it. What should I expect from them today? I asked, refocusing on the immediate challenge. They're nervous, she admitted. Dad's been cleaning the garage all week, which is what he does when he's anxious. Mom's cooked enough food for an army. They know they handled things badly, but they're not great at admitting mistakes. That's an understatement, I muttered. Give them a chance, she pleaded. They're trying, in their way. The drive to our childhood home felt surreal, like visiting a movie set of a life I once lived. Sandra followed in her car, giving me space to process alone. As I parked in the driveway, memories cascaded through my mind. Learning to ride a bike on this street, doing homework at the kitchen table, the painful conversation that had set me on my independent path. My mother opened the door before I reached it. She had aged noticeably, her hair now completely gray, lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. For a moment she simply stared, as though confirming I was real, then stepped forward with uncharacteristic hesitation. Harold, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Welcome home. The hug that followed was awkward but genuine, breaking years of physical distance. My father appeared behind her, looking simultaneously older and exactly the same, his posture stiff with unspoken tension. Son, he said with a formal nod, extending his hand. I took it, noting the strength still present in his grip despite the years. Good to have you back. The initial hours were filled with careful conversation, everyone avoiding direct mention of the estrangement. My mother gave a tour of the house, pointing out minor renovations as though I were a visiting acquaintance rather than someone who had grown up in these rooms. My father asked polite questions about my current research, his interest seeming genuine if somewhat detached. It was during dinner, as my mother served her signature lasagna, that the facade finally cracked. Sandra mentioned an upcoming interview I had scheduled with a national science podcast, and my father set down his fork with deliberate precision. I still don't understand why we had to learn about all your achievements from strangers, he said, his tone carrying the first hint of the anger Sandra had mentioned. 4 years of groundbreaking research, and not once did you think to call and share your progress. The familiar spark of indignation flared within me, but I forced myself to respond calmly. Communication works both ways, Dad. You made it very clear where I stood when I left for college. That was about financial support for a specific decision, he countered. Not a complete severing of family ties. Wasn't it, though? I met his gaze directly. You said I was on my own if I chose Eastridge. Then you bought Sandra a luxury condo while I worked 3 jobs to afford ramen noodles. What message did you think that sent? My mother interjected, her voice quavering. We never meant for you to disappear from our lives, Harold. I didn't disappear, I corrected. I adapted to the reality you created. When you showed me so clearly that Sandra was worth investing in but I wasn't, I made the only choice that preserved my self-respect. I built my own life without your help. A heavy silence fell over the table. My father looked down at his plate, jaw working as he processed my words. When he finally spoke, his voice contained something I had rarely heard from him: uncertainty. We thought we were teaching you independence, he said slowly. You were always so capable, so determined. Sandra was different, more fragile. We worried she wouldn't manage without support. So I was punished for being capable? Not punished, my mother insisted. We truly believed you would thrive regardless of circumstance. And look at what you've accomplished. You've exceeded every expectation, in spite of being cut off, not because of it, I clarified. Do you have any idea how close I came to dropping out from exhaustion? How many nights I went hungry because I had to choose between food and textbooks? My parents exchanged pained glances, the impact of my words visibly hitting home. Sandra reached under the table and squeezed my hand in silent support. We made a mistake, my father said finally, the admission clearly difficult for him. A serious mistake in how we handled things. At the time, it seemed like the right approach for each of you, but we never considered how it would look or feel from your perspective. We were trying to be good parents, my mother added, tears gathering in her eyes. But we failed you, Harold, and I am so sorry. The apology I had never expected to hear hung in the air between us. For years I had carried the weight of their rejection, using it as fuel for my determination, but also as a shield against further hurt. Now that shield wavered, leaving me vulnerable but also somehow lighter. I needed to hear that, I acknowledged quietly. For a long time, I thought you simply valued Sandra more than me. Never, my mother insisted. We were misguided, but we loved you both equally. We just expressed it very differently, and that was wrong. We're proud of you, son, my father added, emotion making his voice rough. What you've accomplished, completely on your own. It's extraordinary. I watch that interview sometimes and think, that's my boy. The conversation continued late into the evening, years of misunderstandings and hurt gradually giving way to tentative understanding. The damage couldn't be undone in a single night, but the foundation for healing had been laid. As the weekend progressed, small moments of connection accumulated. My father showed interest in the technical details of my research, revealing a genuine pride in my achievements. My mother pulled out photo albums, filling me in on family events I had missed. Sandra and I rebuilt our sibling bond, no longer separated by the disparity in how we had been treated. On my final morning, before heading to the airport, I sat alone on the back porch, reflecting on the unexpected turn this visit had taken. My father joined me, offering a cup of coffee as he settled into the adjacent chair. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, about being punished for capability. That was never our intention, but intentions don't change impact. We should have supported both of you, just in different ways appropriate to your needs. I appreciate you acknowledging that, I replied. The irony is, we thought we were preparing you for the real world. He shook his head ruefully. Instead, we nearly lost you completely. The experience did teach me something valuable, I admitted. It showed me I could rely on myself when necessary. That knowledge gave me confidence in my research when results weren't coming and funding was uncertain. You shouldn't have had to learn that lesson so harshly. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. There's something else I wanted to tell you. San Francisco State is expanding their materials science department. They're looking for researchers with industry connections, like what you're developing with that corporation. It would put you much closer to home, if that's something you might consider. The suggestion hung in the air between us, not a demand but an invitation. A year ago, I would have rejected it outright, seeing it as another attempt to control my choices. Now, I recognized it as an olive branch, an expression of desire for continued connection. I'll look into it, I promised, not committing but not dismissing the idea either. My current position has another year, but after that, I'm open to possibilities. As I prepared to leave, my mother pressed a small package into my hands. Just something to remind you that no matter where you go, you have a home here now. On the plane, I unwrapped it to find a framed photo of the four of us from the weekend, our first family picture in over 4 years. Despite the lingering awkwardness visible in our postures, there was also genuine warmth in our expressions, the beginning of something new rather than a return to the past. The journey from rejected son to respected scientist had been long and often painful. The family that had once pushed me away was now reaching out, not because of my success but because they had recognized their mistake. The reconciliation wasn't perfect or complete, but it was authentic. Looking back, I realized that while their actions had wounded me deeply, they had also inadvertently set me on a path to discovering my own strength. The hardships I endured became the foundation for resilience that served me well in the challenging world of scientific research. The family I built among friends and colleagues taught me that support can come from unexpected sources when traditional ones fail. Most importantly, I learned that true independence isn't about rejecting connection, but about choosing connections that are healthy and reciprocal. Sometimes the family we're born into needs to evolve, just as we do, before those relationships can flourish. As the plane climbed through clouds toward home, I recognized that the anger I had carried for so long had served its purpose, fueling my determination when I needed it most. Now, I could begin to release it, not for my parents' sake but for my own peace. The future held possibilities for a relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation or resentment. I don't know if your family has ever treated you unfairly or made you feel less valued than you deserve. Maybe you've struggled to prove yourself while watching others receive support that was denied to you. If that resonates with your experience, I hope my story offers some comfort. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most meaningful destinations, and the family we create can be as important as the one we're born into. Have you ever had to rebuild a damaged relationship or found strength in adversity that surprised you? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story meant something to you, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these personal journeys. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the greatest success is not what you achieve, but who you become along the way.